Somewhere beneath the broken soil of ancient Mesopotamia, where the first cities rose from mud and vanished back into dust, a clay tablet was found in fragments. It was not gold. It was not beautiful. It did not look like treasure. But the lines carved into it pointed towards something far more disturbing than any buried crown. The inscription appears to describe 3 doors beneath the earth, 3 hidden thresholds, 3 passages connected to the oldest map of reality the Sumerians ever imagined. 1 door led to the deep waters below. 1 door led to the buried foundation of the world. But the 3rd door, the story claims, was never meant to open again. The frightening part is not that the Sumerians believed something existed under our feet. The frightening part is how carefully they described it. Their tablets speak of gates, guards, offerings, laws, and names that had to be remembered. They did not treat the underworld like vague darkness. They treated it like a controlled system, a place with rules, a place with borders, a place where something was being held back. And if one line in the old story is understood correctly, the purpose of the 3rd door was not to let the dead enter. It was to make sure they never came back out. The records behind this mystery are not one perfect tablet with one clear message. They are broken fragments, copied and recopied across centuries. Some came from ruined libraries and buried temple rooms in what is now Iraq. To a casual reader, they look like myths, but when the fragments are placed beside each other, a pattern appears. The Sumerian world had layers. Above was the sky of the gods. Here was the land of the living. Beneath were hidden waters, buried powers, and the land of no return. In the oldest stories, the universe was divided among divine powers. The sky belonged to An, the earth belonged to Enlil. The deep waters beneath the world belonged to Enki, and far below, in the house of dust, ruled Ereshkigal, queen of the dead. At first, this sounds like ordinary mythology, but the tablets do something unusual. They describe entrances, they describe gates. Gods travel down, spirits rise, messengers cross boundaries, and every time a boundary is crossed, the story becomes dangerous. The first door appears to lead into the Abzu, the deep freshwater world beneath the earth. To the Sumerians, the Abzu was not a normal sea. It was a hidden abyss below the surface, the source of rivers, springs, wells, wisdom, and secret knowledge. Enki, the god of wisdom, was said to rule there. This made the first door tempting. It was not the door of death. It was the door of hidden knowledge. It promised access to something older than cities and kings. Some interpret the Abzu as a spiritual symbol. Others see a memory of underground water, springs, and caverns. But the mystery is why they placed wisdom under the earth. In their world, knowledge did not simply come from the sky. It rose from below. It came from the dark. It came from a place no human could see directly. And that made the first door sacred, but dangerous. The tablet suggests this door could be approached only with permission, through ritual, dream, or divine favor. A human could not simply force it open. The deep might give wisdom, but it could also take the seeker. This is the first warning hidden in the pattern. The doors beneath the earth were not made for curiosity. They were thresholds, and a threshold protects you only if you respect it. The second door is harder to understand because it does not lead to water, and it does not lead to death. It seems to lead into the buried foundation of the world itself. In Sumerian thought, the earth was part of a cosmic structure, separated from the sky and held in order by divine powers. Beneath the surface were roots and ancient forces older than memory. The stories do not give a modern map. They give fragments. A cosmic mountain, a sacred tree, a separation of heaven and earth, a hidden lower region where boundaries were fixed. This second door may have represented where the world was fastened together. If the Abzu was hidden knowledge, this was hidden order. Opening a door into knowledge might destroy one person, but opening a door into the foundation could disturb the balance of everything above it. The Sumerians feared broken boundaries between gods and humans, between heaven and earth, between living and dead. When borders are crossed without permission, disaster follows. But even that is not the door the warning is about. The third door leads to the place the Sumerians knew as the land of no return. Later texts connect it with Irkalla, the underworld, the house of dust, the kingdom of Ereshkigal. This was not hell in the modern sense. There was no fire, no devil, no final court where the good and evil were separated. The Sumerian afterlife was colder than that. Everyone went there. Kings and servants, priests and soldiers, children and strangers. The dead entered the same darkness, ate dust, drank little, and slowly lost the power they had in life. This is what makes the third door different. It does not tempt with wisdom. It does not hold up the world. It contains the dead. In the story of Inanna, later known as Ishtar, the goddess descends below. At each gate, she is forced to remove something: her crown, her jewels, her royal clothing, her power. By the time she reaches the throne of Ereshkigal, she is no longer the shining queen of heaven. She is stripped, silent, and helpless. The descent is not only travel, it is removal. The underworld takes away identity piece by piece, until nothing remains but the soul before death's ruler. And then comes the line that makes the third door feel less like myth and more like warning. In a later version of the story, Ishtar reaches the gate of the underworld and demands entrance. The gatekeeper refuses. Ishtar threatens to break the door, smash the bolt, and raise the dead so they consume the living until the dead outnumber them. Some scholars treat this as dramatic language, a mythic exaggeration, but the story does not treat it like a joke. The gatekeeper does not ignore her. The gods do not laugh. The door is opened. That reaction matters. If the threat is only poetry, why does everyone obey it? This is the heart of the mystery. The third door may not have been imagined simply as a passage for souls going down. It may have been imagined as a barrier stopping the dead from coming up. The gate, the bolt, the guards, the inner thresholds, the stripping away of power, all of it begins to look like containment. Not punishment, not judgment, containment. And the Sumerians took containment seriously. They believed the dead still needed food and water. Families made offerings to ancestors. Names were remembered. Rituals were repeated, not only out of love, but out of fear. A neglected ghost could become restless. It could enter the home. It could bring sickness, nightmares, madness, and misfortune. The dead were not gone in a peaceful, distant way. They were below, but still connected. Quiet, but still hungry, remembered, or dangerous. This changes how the third door should be understood. It was not guarded only by divine beings. It was guarded by ritual, by memory, by the act of feeding the dead and speaking their names. The living had to maintain the border. Forgetting was not harmless. Forgetting loosened the boundary. Now the three doors become clearer. The first door leads to the hidden water of wisdom. It can be approached, but only with permission. The second door leads to the buried foundation of order. It must not be disturbed, because it touches the structure of the world. The third door leads to the land of no return. It is the most dangerous because behind it waits a population greater than the living, the dead of every generation, the countless silent ones, the ones who must be remembered, fed, and kept below. That is why one door was never meant to open again. The old texts never need to show monsters crawling from the ground. The horror is older than that. It is the horror of a boundary failing, the fear that death is not an ending, but a sealed room. And the only thing worse than entering that room is discovering that the door was never locked from the inside. Some modern viewers may dismiss this as myth, and maybe it is. But myths reveal what civilizations feared enough to preserve. The Sumerians were practical people. They recorded grain, sheep taxes, marriages, temple accounts, land deals, and labor. They invented writing for record keeping. And yet, alongside those records, they preserved stories about gates below the earth, hungry ghosts, and a goddess threatening to break the underworld door so the dead could rise. And then there are the missing lines. Many tablets are damaged, clay breaks, fires destroy libraries, empires fall, names vanish. But the missing pieces are exactly where the imagination becomes trapped. We have enough to know the underworld had gates, enough to know the door had a bolt, enough to know breaking it meant the dead could return. But we do not have the full explanation of why the third door was sealed in the first place. Maybe time simply took the line we most want to read, but the silence creates the final loop of the mystery. What if the lost line named what was behind the door? What if it explained why the dead had to be contained? What if the scribe copied only what could be safely written and left the rest unspoken? This is where the ancient fear begins to feel modern. The rituals that once fed the dead are gone. The cities of Sumer fell. The families vanished. The language died. The graves were looted, buried, or forgotten. The bowls once filled with water turned to dust. The names once spoken in offerings were lost. If the third door was guarded by memory, then that guard has been absent for thousands of years. A historian would say this is simply what happens to civilizations. They rise, change, and disappear. But the old stories leave behind a darker question. What if the Sumerians believed the boundary between living and dead needed constant maintenance? What if the offerings were not symbolic comfort, but part of the lock? What if the door stayed closed because generation after generation remembered how to keep it closed? That is what separates the third door from the other two. The Abzu belonged to Enki. The buried foundation belonged to cosmic order. But the door of the dead touched every family. It began at the grave. It began with a name spoken in a house. It began with bread, water, silence, and fear. The third door was under the earth, but it was also under every home that remembered its dead. The stories do not give us comfort. They do not say the door was sealed forever. They do not say a hero solved the problem. They leave us with fragments. A goddess at a gate, a bolt, a threat, inner doors, a queen below, hungry ghosts, broken tablets, and a warning that feels too heavy to be decoration. Maybe the Sumerians were describing death in the only language they had. Maybe the three doors were symbols for water, order, and the grave. Maybe the warning was a way to teach respect for ancestors. But symbols become powerful because they carry fear in a shape people remember. And this one survived through fire, conquest, burial, and the death of its own language. That is why the tablet still feels dangerous. Not because it proves there is a literal doorway hidden under a rock, not because it confirms the dead are waiting under our streets, but because it shows that the first writers in human history imagined death as something contained, guarded, hungry, not erased, but kept. In the end, the tablet gives no full answer. It gives a shape. 3 doors beneath the earth, one of deep water, one of buried order, one of no return. The first could grant wisdom, the second could disturb creation, but the third could release what every civilization fears most, the return of what was supposed to stay gone. Maybe the final line was lost by accident. Maybe the clay cracked because time destroys everything. Or maybe the warning was never meant to be complete. Maybe the scribes stopped because some names are safer when they are not written. Maybe some doors stay closed only because no one remembers how to call them. And that leaves the question buried in the silence of the tablet. If the Sumerians were wrong, then the third door is only a myth and the dead are only memories. But if they believed even one part of this warning, then the oldest civilization on Earth was not just writing about death, it was writing about a seal guarded by names, offerings, and fear. And after thousands of years without the old rituals, without the old words, and without anyone left who remembers the rule, the question is not why one door was never meant to open again. The question is who is keeping it closed now.